Can you hear me? Okay. With an introduction like that, I'm not sure I need to say anything more, but I appreciate very much your introducing me, Motoko, and being here and inviting me to be part of your installation services. Think that's better? Yes. Okay. I got to look down occasionally because otherwise I'm going to get all mixed up. So I can look down and hopefully keep at the mic. To be in this pulpit is an honor for me. It has its own history and all, as you all know. This building has served and continues to serve many purposes. Besides the occasion that brings us here together for the installation of your new moderator and officers, it has a special meaning for me. Mark Keeley was a very special friend of mine. He believed, as do I, that every human being is a child of God. One of the last times I was here was when he supported the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian communions coming together to celebrate similar traditions that happen to lift up the holiness of God. His vision was to move in new directions that called for loving one's neighbor, regardless of their traditional commitments. Today, we come together to recognize another person who has given her life to a similar quest, that all human life is sacred and should be lived with dignity, respect, and grace, sharing together the blessings of God we have come to know in Jesus Christ. To do whatever is necessary in the service of life, as long as it doesn't transgress those basic human values that define who we are. And I will say more about that later. First, let me remind us that this is not the only time in human history when we have been so challenged. Let me read to you the description of another such time, and I quote, "Mismanagement and greed had scandalized the nation and brought collapse to the financial markets. The economy was in shambles, particularly in the cities where the hard times were felt. The judicial system lacked integrity. There were reports of impending war, evidence of emerging capabilities on a scale beyond previous experience, rumors of the possibility of unspeakable atrocities. The political and religious leaders were uncertain of what to do next. There were many reasons for a sense of helplessness and hopelessness." What time of history was that? It was in 1935. Some of you were alive at that time and remember. I won't ask you to put your hands up at this time, but you know the history and where we've gone since then. The time in which we now live is not much different, and now as then it calls for people with vision. Then as now we were behaving like children, always seeking self-gratification, seemingly insensitive to those in need here and around the world. The Apostle Paul said, "When I was a child, I spoke as a child, understood as a child, reasoned as a child." And then, as you remember, he went on to say, "When I became a man," and you may replace that with adult, "I put away childish things." As we all know, all children by nature have a limited view of life. However, if an adult continues to behave like a child, we are in deep trouble. And when that happens, it invariably leads to corruption, a judicial system that lacks integrity, producing a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. The past 6 months or more certainly have been that kind of time. You who are to be installed this morning as new officers of Presbyterian Women now have the opportunity to do whatever is necessary to bring into being new communities that are rooted in tenderness, compassion, love, kindness, generosity, and a recognition of the sacredness of all human life. In the brief time that I have, let me suggest to you 3 ways in which change can take place. First, transformational, second, generational, and third, multicultural. When we speak about change that is transformational, again, let us make use of a passage from Paul's letter to the Romans. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. What the Apostle Paul is suggesting here is that there are two ways to live in this life, one according to the world and the other according to God's agenda. Paul was convinced that in order to bring creative change, our minds need to be transformed away from systems of domination, violence, and oppression, and toward systems that are cooperative and collaborative, that bring people together to work for the common good. This kind of transformation needs to start within each of us as we allow the values of the dominant culture to be rooted out. In other words, we need to allow the indwelling of the Holy Spirit and to align ourselves and our work in the service of life and light and in the service of Jesus Christ. A study of the ministry of Jesus clearly shows his displeasure with the dominance of the religious leadership of his time, undergirded by a system of religious laws that is more confining than healing. By his teaching and practice, he challenged those laws that kept women in their place and men in power, dictated that what was clean and unclean, that defined what was holy and not holy, clarified the difference between what was true worship and what was only ritual, that set the observance of religious law above the meeting of human need. This behavior turned the religious establishment against him and the world upside down. Yes, there are consequences in the choices that we make, that when we are faithful, that is, transformed by the renewing of our minds, we just might upset the status quo. We just might be going against what some would consider being politically correct. The story is told of Dutch-born evangelist Brother Andrew. Perhaps some of you know of this gentleman. He is best known for the years that he was able to get thousands of copies of Bible and other Christian literature into the former Soviet Union. When Soviet communism fell, he turned his efforts elsewhere. What few people know is that he decided to build bridges with Islam. Rather than view Islam as our enemy, as did the political establishment since 1990, he practiced the commandment to love one's neighbor. He talked to and visited with those leaders that some might consider to be terrorists. And in retirement to this day, he continues this mission in the Middle East. Paul was among those witnesses who stood by during the stoning of Stephen, as you will remember in Acts. He did not start his missionary journeys until his mind was renewed and transformed by the Holy Spirit. Before he could be a good news apostle, he recognized the need to stand firm against those who would use unacceptable force to achieve their ends. In that tradition and in the political realm, and I do not mean this as a political statement, I can commend President Obama for his stand on torture. He has made it clear that in order to protect the people of this nation, he will live up to the highest values of our system. As he said in a recent press conference, the best way I can do that is to make sure that we are not taking shortcuts that undermine who we are. It is a stand that is both pragmatic and principled. In all of our relationships at home and abroad, I believe it is a stand worth taking. So let us be transformed by the renewing of our minds. It may bring surprises, but it also promises to bring health and healing.